Hello, book friends. I'm here today to wrap up another year of my reading life. I am going to be sharing with you all of my favorites of 2025, some statistics, some favorite moments, and of course, my top 10 reads of the year. Grab yourself a cuppa and let us get into wrapping up 2025. Hello, I'm Jen and welcome back to my reading life. This is it. This is the final video. Well, I take that back. I have one more video coming to wrap up my December reads from 2025, but today we are going to wrap up the entire year. I'm going to share some of the statistics from my reading life this past year. I'm going to share some favorite moments that I had in this past year in my reading life. And then, of course, we are going to get into the books that I read last year. I have some honorable mentions, and I also am here to give you the list of my 10 favorite books from 2025. Let us not delay any further and let us get into wrapping up all of last year's reads. I'm going to start us off with some statistics from my reading life, but before I do that, I do just want to say that I read a lot of books last year. For the past few years, I have read well over 100 and even 150 books every year, and I do have to give a caveat that I am a very fast reader, and I also prioritize squeezing reading in to all the little moments of my day. And so because of that, I'm able to get through quite a few books. But I'm only sharing these statistics because I just think they're kind of fun to look at and see, and I hope that you enjoy them for what they are. For 2025, I read a total of 185 books. Of those books, 23 of them were rereads, and I had 10 DNFs. And a DNF is a book that I did not finish. And of those DNFs, I counted a few of them towards my total reading goal if I read more than 50 pages. But if I didn't even make it to the 50-page mark, then I don't feel like I want to count them towards my reading goal for the year. And then one of my goals for 2025 was to try to read books that had been sitting on my shelf since prior to January 1st of 2025. And I'm happy to say that of the 185 books that I read, 93 of them were books that had been sitting on my shelf since before the start of 2025. I feel pretty good about that, and I'm hoping to do something similar for 2026 as well. As you know, I love books that have stood the test of time, and my reading life certainly reflects that. In 2025, I read 174 backlist books. So those are books that were published before really probably 2024. So anything published prior to 2024, I counted as a backlist book. And I read 11 books published in or right before 2025. I think a few of them might have been published in late 2024, but I read them in 2025. And so I'm still counting them as new releases because I think that's fairly new if it came out at the end of the prior year. And then finally, I read 149 books in physical book format. And then I read 10 ebooks. And I listened to 26 audiobooks, which I think is probably fairly typical of my reading life. So about 2-ish audiobooks per month. The majority of my books, of course, I read in physical book format. That is my preferred form of reading. And ebooks just always take a back seat. I just prefer to read a physical book. But in a pinch, I will read an ebook. And then one final statistic that doesn't really have anything to do with my reading per se, but was a huge thing that happened to me in 2025. And that is, of course, the massive growth of this lovely channel and all of you lovely subscribers out there. And I just wanted to share that I went from 3,150 subscribers on January 1st, 2025 to 14,808 subscribers on December 31st, 2025. That is an incredible amount of growth. That is nearly 10,000 subscribers growth over the course of 1 year, and I still cannot wholly wrap my head around it. I just want to thank you all so much for being here, for wanting to be a part of my bookish community. It just brings me so much joy to share books with all of you, and yes, just thank you. So this has been lovely, and I know we're already upwards of 14,900 subscribers now, heading towards 15,000. Maybe by the time this video goes up, we'll already be there. I don't know. Honestly, I can't keep up with it. It's hard to believe still the amount of growth and community and support I have found here on YouTube in the under 2 years that I have been here making videos for YouTube. I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary at the beginning of February, and it still gives me so much joy and happiness to be here. And I hope you'll continue to come along with me as I share my reading life with you in 2026. But enough of that. Let us get into the reading from 2025. So first up, I'm going to share a few honorable mentions. So these are some books I just had some categories that kind of came to me, and some books I wanted to share that didn't quite make it into my top 10, but were definitely top reads of the year. I could have made this a top 30. There were so many wonderful books that I read in 2025, but as I was narrowing it down, I thought I would share a few honorable mentions before we get to my top 10. And then at the very end of the video, I'm going to share a few memorable moments from 2025 that have to do with my reading life that were really special to me. So stick around till the end. But let us first get into some of my honorable mentions from 2025. So first up, because I know I have so many mystery-loving fans out there, that I wanted to share what my favorite mystery of the year is, because I don't think I actually had a mystery make it into my top 10 this year, but I did read some wonderful mysteries. I read a lot of books that were parts of series, and while I thoroughly enjoy them, they don't necessarily stand out to me as favorites of the year, even if they are series that are favorites of mine. But this particular book, this is a book I have never heard anybody else talk about, but I read it. It has been sitting on my unread shelf for well over a decade. I'm so glad that I finally read it. I found it so compelling, and that is Death in the Garden by Elizabeth Ironside. And this is an unusual novel because it is structured more like a novel than a mystery, even though there is a mystery at the heart of it. So it is dual timeline. We have one timeline in 1925 and another 60 years later. In the earlier timeline, we have a young married woman, and she's celebrating her 30th birthday. And during the course of her birthday party, where she has friends staying with her and her husband at their home, her husband is found dead, and she is accused of the murder, and I believe even stands trial for it, though she is not convicted. And then 60 years later, her grand niece is also about to turn 30, and she has inherited her great aunt's home, and she is looking through her papers, and she kind of takes it upon herself to find out what happened to her aunt's husband and to finally solve the mystery. And this was very, very well written. It's very much a literary mystery, so you definitely need to be kind of in the mood for that. But this was such a surprise to me. I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed this very unprepossessing cover. Nothing about this other than kind of the description on the back really drew me in, and I think that's why it sat on my shelf for so long. But I highly recommend reading this. I definitely want to read more by Elizabeth Ironside, and yes, this is my favorite mystery of 2025. My next honorable mention goes to my favorite new release of 2025, and that honor is going to The Eights by Joanna Miller. And this is a fictionalized telling of some of the first female graduates of Oxford University. So back in the 20s, Oxford finally allowed women to attend Oxford and earn a degree. So they'd been able to attend classes prior to that, but not earn a degree. Finally, they are able to, and The Eights follows 4 women, fictionalized women, as they are indoctrinated into Oxford and go through their sort of first year as students there. Each of them has a secret that they're keeping, and you follow along and watch their friendships develop and those secrets unravel. And I thought that it was such a well done read. The Oxford setting was fantastic. I love books set at schools and universities. And if you have not read The Eights, I highly, highly recommend it. It was definitely my favorite new release of 2025. And next up in my honorable mentions category is my favorite read outside my comfort zone. And that honor goes to The Hopkins Manuscript by R.C. Sheriff. Now, this is a very different book from The Fortnight in September, which is probably the book that R.C. Sheriff is most well known for. And that is just such a lovely family story, and it's just so beautifully written. And The Hopkins Manuscript is a science fiction, almost dystopian type novel, and it is very, very different from that. I buddy read this with the lovely Miriam from Miriam Elizabeth Reads, and I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed this. This imagines what happens if the moon suddenly begins on a trajectory to crash into the earth, and sort of how that information is given to people and then the aftermath of that. This was so interesting and incredibly well done. This was first published in 1939, so right at the cusp of World War II, and you can kind of see inklings of that sprinkled throughout the novel, but this is such a great book. If you do want to read this, I highly recommend reading it with someone else so you can talk about it, because there is so much going on in this book. I found it utterly fascinating and such a page turner, and I am really not much of a sci-fi reader, but this one I highly recommend. Next up, and I don't know that I want to call this an honorable mention, because I am going to share the one book that I found to be a big disappointment to me, and I know this might hurt some of you. I apologize for that. So many of you have recommended this book to me, but I read it earlier in the year, not long after it came out, and I wanted to love it so, so much. And the beginning of it was really wonderful to me, but it just didn't end up being a book that I loved, or even upon reflection really even liked. And I'm sorry to say that book is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. Normally this would be a book that ticks all of my boxes. It's an epistolary novel. It is about an older woman who writes letters, and she writes to all kinds of people, friends, family. She writes to authors. You get so many different types of letters in here. Unfortunately for me, there is a storyline in here. Well, there's a major plot point in the book that is a huge trigger for me personally. So please don't take my feelings about this book as anything other than my personal feelings. I know so many of you love this book, and I can completely understand why. I also did struggle a bit with finding our main character likable, really at all. And the more I sat with this book, the more I didn't like her. And because that plot point was so difficult for me, and unfortunately this book was just such a letdown, unfortunately, because I had such high hopes for it. It sounded so wonderful, but for me personally, it's not going to be a favorite. And in fact, I'm probably going to donate this copy to a little free library, and I'm sure somebody else will read it, and I hope they love it. Moving away from that little bit of a downer to the book that I found the most surprising read of 2025. And that book has to be Come Tell Me How You Live by Agatha Christie Mallowan. This is, of course, the Agatha Christie, and this is a memoir of her life on archaeological digs with her husband, Max Mallowan, her second husband, who was an archaeologist. And I, again, have had this book for a number of years and didn't pick it up because I was worried that it was going to be kind of dry and not that interesting, even though I love to read about books set in the Middle East. I love Agatha Christie's mysteries set in the Middle East, especially those set on archaeological digs. I don't know why I was worried about this book, because I absolutely loved it. I found it so fascinating, such a page turner. I mean, she's a wonderful writer, no matter what she is writing, whether it's mysteries or memoirs or something else entirely. I will read whatever she writes. This book is fabulous. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. I actually think it would be great to read one of her books set in the Middle East and then read this book as a companion to it. I just think that would be kind of lovely and a way to connect this book to Agatha Christie's writings. But I found this fantastic. Absolutely loved it. It's one of my top nonfiction books of the year and definitely the biggest surprise. And then my last honorable mention has to go to my favorite reread of 2025. And I don't include my rereads in my favorites of the year because most of them are already favorites. But this particular book wasn't a favorite, and I reread this with my Gilded Age buddy read group. So of the 23 books that I reread in 2025, this one definitely made the biggest impact on me. And that book is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. When I first read this book in high school, I hated it. I mean, hated it. But I don't know that high school me could in any way appreciate this book and what Fitzgerald was trying to do and say with this novel. I found this such a more satisfying reading experience this time around. Fitzgerald's language is so beautiful. He has such a way with words, and this book is a revelation of that. And while it's full of a lot of unlikable characters, I think coming at this with my 52 years of life experience, I can see the humanity in each of them. And even if they're not likable, I can better understand them and their motivations and what happens as a result of their interactions in this novel. And I loved this. We had such a great discussion of this with my Gilded Age buddy read ladies. Thank you so much, Susan, Elizabeth, Melissa, for helping me find my way back to a book that I didn't think I was going to like and ended up absolutely loving. And now it is time for my top 10 reads of 2025. And I did actually try to put these in ascending order. So from my 10th favorite to my number one book of 2025, subject to change on any day of the week. But as of today, this is their ranking. I don't normally do this, but I just thought it would kind of be fun this year to try and rank my top 10. So that is what we are doing today. And in the number 10 spot, that has to go to Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. I absolutely love this. I think of the Bronte novels I have read, this is a very close second to Jane Eyre for me. I only wish it was longer. That is the only flaw I see in Agnes Grey, is that I wish it was longer. I just loved this story of a young governess and her charges, and how Agnes finds her way when she is really not prepared to be a governess. And I just absolutely adored this. I loved it nearly as much as I love Jane Eyre. I thought Agnes was a wonderful character. I could not get enough of her. Like I said, my only complaint with this book is that I wish it was longer. And then in the number 9 spot, we have another classic novel. The classics came in strong in my top 10 this year. And in the number 9 spot is The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness, why can I never say her name? Imuska Orczy. I had never in my life really had any kind of desire to read The Scarlet Pimpernel, and then this was the book that came in my Small Home Comforts winter book box this past year, and I read it and I adored it. It is so fun. It's got such great pacing to it. It is such a fun adventure story, and if you've never read The Scarlet Pimpernel, I highly, highly recommend it. If you want something that's just going to kind of keep you moving right along with the story, definitely give this a read. And then for sure, go and watch the movie with Jane Seymour. It is absolutely wonderful and a great adaptation of this very, very fun classic novel. And then in the number 8 spot is my favorite nonfiction read of 2025, and that is Raising Hair by Chloe Dalton. This is one of the books I read very early in 2025, but it stuck with me throughout the entire year, and I kept thinking about this book over and over again. I actually listened to the audiobook and I loved it so much I had to go out and get myself a hard copy so that I could read it again and annotate it. There's so many lovely passages in here. If you know nothing about hairs, don't let that bother you or stop you from reading this book, because it's such a lovely rumination on humans and our connection to the natural world and how we can help the natural world without interfering too much. And Chloe Dalton does such a great job of describing her experience of caring for this baby hare that comes into her life without making it into a pet and allowing it to retain its wildness and go back out into the wild. And I highly recommend this if you haven't read it. If you enjoy narrative nonfiction, I think this is one of the most wonderful examples of it that came out in 2025. Moving on to the book that is in the number 7 spot for me this year, and that is a book for book lovers, and that is Parnassus on Wheels by Christopher Morley. My edition doesn't have its dust jacket anymore, so it's a little unprepossessing, but this is such a fantastic book about there's a man who owns a cart that he sells books from, and he is coming to try to sell the wagon to this man who lives with his sister, and the man isn't there when he comes by, and the sister ends up taking on the book selling wagon and going off, and she and this man travel together for a while, and he sort of shows her the ropes, and we just kind of follow along on their book selling wagon riding adventures. And this is such a fun book for book lovers. I highly recommend it if you've never read it. It was so, so lovely and bookish and just delightful. I loved it. And I'm so glad I finally read it. And then the book that is holding down the number 6 spot in my favorite reads of 2025 was my year-long read of Stillmeadow Calendar by Gladys Taber. I've become such a huge Gladys Taber fan over the past couple of years, and if you've never read her, she writes such wonderful books about nature, about her life on her home in Connecticut, Stillmeadow, and what that's like, just sort of the day-to-day domesticity of living in this house and taking care of it and the land and growing food and caring for it and taking care of her animals and her family. And it's just so lovely. This one, Stillmeadow Calendar, goes through the entire year. So there is a chapter for each month of the year, and that was how I read it. I started every month with a chapter from Stillmeadow Calendar, and I am very excited because this year I am going to be doing the same thing with her book Stillmeadow Road. My lovely friend Melissa and I are buddy reading it throughout all of 2026. And again, it's just delightful to spend a part of every month with Gladys Taber. Her books are so hard to find. I've been lucky enough to get my hands on, I think, about 10 or so of them now. My collection continues to grow, and I look forward to reading more and more of her as the years go by. But she's so, so lovely. If you love Susan Branch, if you love quiet, reflective stories about everyday life, then definitely seek out Gladys Taber. And coming in at the number 5 spot is a book that I think should be considered a classic, even though it's not very well known, and that is The Semi-Detached House by Emily Eden. I have a bind up here of The Semi-Attached Couple and The Semi-Detached House, and this is often how you find these two books. Funnily enough, we read The Semi-Attached Couple for the Cozy Reader Book Club, and I enjoyed it. I know it wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but I liked it a lot. And then I immediately went on to read The Semi-Detached House, which really, the two novels don't have anything to do with one another. But I loved The Semi-Detached House. It is very funny. It has a much quicker pace than The Semi-Attached Couple, and it is just such good fun. In The Semi-Detached House, we have a young woman who is renting a semi-detached house while her husband, I think he's in the Navy and he's going to be gone for a while. So she and, I want to say, is it her sister? Gosh, it's been a little while since I've read it and now I'm blanking, but she is there, and it's just about her life there and the neighbors, and she kind of gets all involved with what's going on with them, and it is just so much fun. If you're a Jane Austen fan, definitely give Emily Eden a read. She feels very similar, that sort of comedy of manners, kind of, look at the social mores of the time. And I absolutely love The Semi-Detached House. I will definitely be reading it again. It is just a lovely, lovely, underrated classic and one of my favorites of 2025. And then in the number 4 spot is a coming of age novel that I have said in the past should be mentioned alongside books like A Tree Grows in Brooklyn and I Capture the Castle. And that book is Oh, the Brave Music by Dorothy Evelyn Smith. I am so, so glad we read this for the Cozy Reader Book Club last year. And I am so, so glad that the British Library Women Writers series republished this book because it deserves a spot on your shelf. It is so, so wonderful. We follow the young Ruanne Ashley as she goes from her father's house, where he kind of runs a very tight ship, to the home where her mother had grown up, where she's given a lot more freedom. And we just see what happens to her over the course of some years. And I just loved this. Just talking about it now makes me already want to reread it. I definitely will be rereading it. I think this is absolutely fantastic. If you enjoy coming of age novels, definitely add this one to your TBR. It is not to be missed. And now we are down to the top 3 books that I read in 2025. And I'm going to give a little caveat here that there are more than 3 books in my top 3. Because first up in the number 3 spot is a trilogy, which I just feel like you cannot separate one of these from the other. I'm just lumping them all together as my 3rd favorite read of the year, and that is the Montmoret Journals trilogy by Michelle Cooper. And this is the first book, A Brief History of Montmoret, is followed by The Fitzosbornes in Exile and then The Fitzosbornes at War. And I could have read a dozen more books about the Fitzosbornes. I absolutely love them. If you enjoy, again, coming of age novels, if you enjoy family sagas, if you enjoy books set in the lead up to and then during World War II in and near England, then definitely give the Montmoret trilogy a read. I absolutely love them. They are being told in journal format, obviously. So if you're looking for something to read this epistolary January, A Brief History of Montmoret would be a fantastic pick. and we're following young Sophie Fitzosborne and her family, who are the royal family on the island nation of Montmoret, and we follow along with what happens to them over the course of quite a few years. And this trilogy, so wonderful. It's definitely one I will read and reread again and again. I absolutely loved it. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Again, my third favorite books of the year. And then in the number 2 spot is a book that I have raved about throughout 2025. I don't know how many times I've shared about this book because I cannot sing its praises highly enough. And again, this would be another great pick for Epistolary January, and that is The Bee and the Fly, The Improbable Correspondence of Louisa May Alcott and Emily Dickinson by Lorraine Taziello and Jane Cavallina. This book, it's another one that had sat on my shelf for a few years. I don't know why I didn't pick it up, and then I picked it up last Epistolary January and absolutely loved it. Again, if you enjoy Louisa May Alcott's writing and or Emily Dickinson, definitely give this novel a read. It imagines a friendship between the two of them, even though there's no documentation that one actually existed. But at the end of the book, the authors definitely give you some reasonings behind why it could possibly have been the case that they would have met and could have been friends. And this book is just so lovely. And it takes excerpts from both of their actual writings and incorporates them into the letters they write to one another. And I just think it adds a level of authenticity to the book. And I cannot, again, recommend this one enough. I know a number of you have read this after I recommended it. I hope many more of you will pick it up. It is so wonderful, and my second favorite book of 2025. And then here we are at my number 1 book. Actually, it's 2 books. This is a duology, and I don't have the books to hold up for you because they aren't currently in print, but they're about to be. Stay tuned for the details of that. But these books are Belle Lamington and Fletcher's End by D.E. Stevenson. Be still, my ever-loving D.E. Stevenson heart. I adored this duology, and it is so wonderful. I know I talk about it all the time on my channel, but I do that for a reason because I think it's fabulous, and I am so very thrilled that Dean Street Press is republishing both books this summer. They're coming out in July, and we are going to be reading them in September for the Cozy Reader Book Club. So if you want to read these books, they are available in ebook format and audiobook. I highly recommend the audiobooks. I listened to them that way for my first read and absolutely love them. Though I cannot wait to get my physical copies and read them in physical book format for my reread this year. So wonderful. This is the story of course, Belle Lamington, and we follow her from when she is living in London and she works in an office and she has a small flat and she's not the happiest maybe, but we follow along with what happens to her in her personal life, in her work life, and then Fletcher's End continues that story. And I'm not going to tell you a single thing about it because you need to read Belle Lamington first and then read Fletcher's End. So don't read any spoilers for Fletcher's End because it will spoil things. But it's just so delightful. Belle Lamington is such a fantastic character, and Fletcher's End is so wonderful because it's got so many lovely domestic details to it, the setting up of a house, and it's just, they're so good. They are so good, so charming. If you just need something to lift your spirits, read Belle Lamington and Fletcher's End. I cannot recommend them highly enough. My favorite reads of 2025. And finally, I thought I would share some of my favorite bookish moments of 2025. First up, I don't often get out and meet authors in real life, but I met two this past year, and it was a thrill to meet them both. First up, I met Elizabeth George, and she is the author of the Inspector Lynley mystery series, which I have read so many of, but she had a new book coming out in the series this year, and so she was touring around, giving talks. And so my mom and I went across the bay to an independent bookstore that was hosting her and listened to her speak and got to meet her and have a picture taken with her. And she was so, so lovely. And I am just thrilled that I got to meet her, and I cannot wait to read her new book. And then I also got to meet the lovely Kim Fay, author of Love and Saffron and Kate and Frida. And Kim and I have bonded over our mutual love of Laurie Colwin, and it was so wonderful to meet her in person. She came to my local independent bookstore to talk about Kate and Frida and sign books, and it was so wonderful to meet her in person. She is just as lovely in person as she is online and in her books, but meeting her was absolutely a highlight for me. And then speaking of bookish memorable moments from 2025 that center around authors, I actually received emails from two different authors, two authors whose books showed up in my top 3 books of 2025. Lorraine Taziello and Michelle Cooper both reached out to me after having seen some of the videos where I talked about their books, thanking me for sharing about their books and being a proponent of their works. And I can't tell you how exciting that is to get an email from an author who took it upon themselves to take time out of their lives to reach out to me. That's just such a thrill. So lovely. And I love both their books, as you can tell. So read them because they are lovely people in addition to being fantastic authors. And then finally, I have a few bookish moments, memorable happenings from 2025 that have to do with my channel here. And first up was, of course, hosting my very first Jane Austen January, or January as we call it. And that was such a thrill. I was so nervous about it. I had never done anything like that, hosted any kind of read along. It was the first time I did any kind of live stream on my channel. And it was a wonderful learning experience. You all were so generous and gracious. And as you all know, we are now doing our second annual January read along. We are reading Sense and Sensibility this year. So much fun. I love reading Jane Austen with all of you, and I look forward to continuing this tradition in the years to come. And then, of course, that also led to my 8-month-long read along of the Emma M. Lyon books, which are sitting right here. And then we followed it up by reading The Queue by Beth Brower. And that was, again, another lovely reading experience. I thoroughly enjoyed hosting those read-alongs, chatting about the books with you, having the live streams at the end of every month. I had so many wonderful bookish friends come on and join me in my live stream. So thank you so much to all of the lovely ladies who came and talked about Emma M. Lyon with me and my viewers. It was just such a wonderful experience. And yes, I am already thinking about what other types of read-alongs and things we can do throughout 2026. So stay tuned, more details to come soon. But those read-alongs were just some of the best parts of 2025 for me. As was something that I started that I was really, really nervous about doing, and has ended up being such a lovely part of my bookish life and has brought so many lovely book friends into my life and into this little community, and that is starting my Patreon. I wasn't sure when I decided to start my Patreon if anyone would even want to join it and support me in that way. And I know not everybody can, but for those of you who have been able to join Patreon, and especially join at the Book Jennies tier, it has become such an important and wonderful part of my reading life to have that extra bookish community and connection that we have in the Book Jennies group. We have book chats every month and we do read-alongs on a quarterly basis. I put out extra content for all of the Book Jennies. And so if that's something that interests you, we would love to have you join us. We have such a wonderful group there. And it's really a great way for me to connect more personally with the people in that group, because at nearly 15,000 subscribers right now, it's definitely become more of a challenge to connect and interact with everybody. But I definitely feel like we have such a lovely community over on the Book Jennies. I hope it stays that way. And if you're at all interested in joining us, we would love to have you. And then finally, probably the biggest thing that happened on my channel in 2025 was, of course, its growth. And hitting 10,000 subscribers back in November was such a huge milestone for me. I had no idea when I started this channel that anybody was going to want to watch me or listen to me talk about books. And to think that 10,000 and now nearly 15,000 of you want to come here and hear me and see me talk about books and my reading life, it's such a lovely feeling to know that there are so many kindred book spirits out there who want to talk about books that maybe aren't being talked about in a lot of other places. And I hope I can continue to bring that to you, continue to share books that maybe you haven't heard of or are less familiar or aren't being promoted as much out on BookTube right now. If that's what you're looking for, then you have come to the right place, because that is what I will continue to share. And I do read new books, but I do love to share those books that have stood the test of time. And I will continue to do that as we move forward into 2026. Oh my goodness. If you made it this far, you get a gold star. Let us chat down in the comments. I would love to know, what is a standout moment from your 2025 reading life? What are some of the best books that you read last year? Let us chat all things 2025 reading and 2025 bookish moments down in the comments below. And if you don't have anything to add, but you would like to let me know you were here, because comments really do help my channel, let's leave some gold stars, because you all deserve gold stars for being here, for subscribing, for watching, for making it through this video, which I know is going to be very long, even though I haven't edited it yet. So thank you all so much. Leave those gold stars. And I appreciate all of the comments, all of the likes, all of the hypes, all of the subscribes. If you are new here, I would love it if you would subscribe and join our bookish community. It just means the world to me. 2025 was a fabulous reading year for me, due in no small part to all of you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And in case you're curious about what 2026 holds for me in terms of my reading plans and goals for the coming year, stay tuned, because that's coming on Friday. And until then, I wish you a good book and a warm cuppa. Bye.